Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Great show for you today for a Wednesday show. Second hour, we're going to talk about papal infallibility. You got questions about papal infallibility? Almost everybody does. And maybe they're more intense in a time of crisis and upset than they usually are. But we got a great theologian and apologist on the second hour. Michael Lofton from Reason and Theology is going to be here to talk about papal infallibility. So save up your papal infallibility questions for the second hour. And by the way, that's of course whether you're Catholic or not, whether you agree with that doctrine of the church or don't. You're welcome to call with your questions about papal infallibility the second hour. I got to admit, I'm not one of those people who looks forward to Lent. I have some feelings of dread that come up around Lent. But for the last 4 years, I feel better about Lent because I know when Lent is coming, Gary Zimak is coming. And we're going to have our annual Give Up Worry for Lent program. And that's what we are doing this hour. Give Up Worry for Lent. Are you a worrier? You want some help with that? Maybe you have a worrier in the home that you'd like some help with. Helping that person, 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. Gary Zimak is the best-selling author of Give Up Worry for Lent and a popular speaker and parish mission leader. You can sign up for his daily email reflections or arrange to bring him to your parish by visiting his website, followingthetruth.com. Gary Zimak, thanks for being with us.
Hey, Cy, it's always a pleasure to hang out with you, my friend.
I know it's an actual annual tradition now.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. It's next year it'll be half a decade we've been doing this, and I'm so glad that we do, because worry is a serious problem, and it's not one that God is neutral about.
No, Cy, Jesus was, and by the way, I'm with you about Lent. Lent's tough for me. I don't do Lent very well,
right.
But I definitely see the benefit, and in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was very clear when he said specifically, do not worry, because when we worry, we try to take control of our lives over from him. Yeah. And that's not going to work as followers of Christ, So this whole Give Up Worry for Lent thing, the book came out in 2019 for the first time, and sales have gone up every year since it first came out. Once again, it's sold out on Amazon. Now, the book is still available. We'll talk about that a little later. But people are worried, Cy, and my role as an evangelist is to go out there. I believe this is the role the Lord gave me, and talk to the worriers out there and say, look, Jesus can help you. And I've got a very captive audience, even more so this year than in the past.
Yeah, and it's very sad, and for all of us, that we miss out on one of the great gifts of being a disciple of Christ, which is peace.
Right.
One of the things that he wants us to have is peace, and we don't have, many of us don't have peace.
Yeah, and as somebody who is an anxious person by nature, my job is to let people know that you can have that peace, even though you still may be anxious by nature, even though I still tend to catastrophize very quickly. I now know to do what the apostles did in the boat when Jesus was asleep and the storm was threatening to sink the boat. I wake him up now, Cy.
Yeah.
And, that's where I get my peace. But I still have the tendency to be anxious. So I understand the mind of a worrier because I am a worrier at heart.
888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. This is the thing that you do, Gary. Like, there's, we can at different times in our life we need psychological help or counseling or psychiatric help, and all of that is fine. But you always refer to Bible verses. With you, I think you have a million Bible verses about trusting in God and not worrying.
Yeah, and you know what, Cy, I was never somebody who was familiar with the Bible, even though I'm a cradle Catholic. The Bible was always intimidating to me, but that's why I've been, for the past 10 years now, extracting these verses, especially directed to people like me who worry, so that they're in my books. People can see these verses, and Give Up Worry for Lent contains a Bible verse each day. My daily email reflection, I call it Let Not Your Heart Be Troubled. This is free of charge. I started this when the pandemic started. People are responding to this. I got thousands of people on my daily email list for Bible verses, for reflections, for that help that they need. So people are responding.
But again, you can find all of Gary's stuff at followthetruth.com. You can call us right now and talk with Gary, 888-318-7884. The book is called Give Up Worry for Lent. The year that it came out, we had Gary on and realized this is something, I mean, we've done it for Advent, we've done it at other times of the years, but we always do it before Lent because Lent is a wonderful time it's a time of penance, it's a time of preparation, a wonderful time of graces to work on trusting God. And that's the key, isn't it, Gary? Trusting God?
It really is. Inside, really quick, the website is followingthetruth.com, not follow the truth.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, just sorry.
It's probably some horrible person, too. I just sent people to.
I was worried. I was worried.
Were you worried?
Sending people to the wrong website.
Don't worry, Gary. It's going to be all right. Don't worry.
But anyway, but these verses are important, and I forgot the original question you asked me because I was so busy.
Trusting God. That being the key. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a control issue. With me, it really is. And the Lord doesn't want us to try to control the uncontrollable. And that's what worry amounts to. It's an attempt to control the uncontrollable. We're still supposed to do what we can, but the Lord wants us to trust him with the stuff that he's supposed to do. And, during Lent, this is a great time to rid ourselves of this attachment to worry, because you know why? It feels good. Nobody wants to admit that, but when we worry, we fool ourselves into thinking that we're in control, but that we're not, as we all know now, courtesy of the pandemic.
Yeah, right.
But but we like to fool ourselves, and I'll tell you what, I would never go back now that I've really surrendered my life, and I do it every day, to the Lord. Things are a lot better for me. I'm a lot more peaceful than I ever was.
888-318-7884. I do think that that peace that Gary talks about is the peace that the Lord wills for each and every one of us. And sometimes we have not because we ask not. And learning to give up worry for Lent is lots of people have gone through the book. I've told you this many times. My wife, I think, did it the first year that it came out and then the second year that it came out. And I can't remember last year. I don't remember, but maybe doing it again this year. That's okay, too. I mean, these are lessons you have to learn over and over again. But maybe tell a little bit of your story, because it's interesting to me that it often is the case that the part of ourselves that we don't like or that we see as our weakest is the part where the Lord uses us. And I think that's so obvious in your case, that you had this affliction of worry, and now you're like the apostle to the worried.
Yeah, and I'm proud to be able to do what I do. I'm so thankful the Lord has chosen me. Sai, as I mentioned, I go back a long time as a worrier. I started maybe when I was about 6 or 7 years old, worrying about my parents dying, worried about school, worried about all kinds of things that weren't based in reality. And along the way, I ran into stomach issues. I had heart palpitations. I was in the emergency room with panic attacks on multiple occasions. All of these manifestations of my tendency to worry about my problems. And, I'm embarrassed to admit, as a cradle Catholic, as somebody who went through 12 years of Catholic school, I never really made the connection that maybe Jesus could help me. That happened in a big way. That happened in a big way one year. 2004 was the big conversion in my life, when I had what I would call a pretty serious health crisis. It ended up being nothing, but the doctors were mystified what was wrong with me. I finally turned to the Lord and started asking him to help me because I thought I was dying. And even though there was no resolution for several months, I was feeling peace. I made the connection. Hey, this Jesus, he's for real.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the thing. He wasn't real to me for all those years. Once he became real, it's like, whoa. And then I just started praying. And for 3 years, I prayed. My wife and I prayed. I was in the software industry. We prayed, let Gary work for you, Lord, full time. And what happened was in 2012, I got laid off. Not exactly the way I pictured it, but that launched my career into full-time ministry. And here we are 10 years later. My 12th book will be coming out soon. Radio, TV. I'm getting to talk to Cy Kellett on Catholic Answers Live.
Can you beat that, Gary?
No,
really?
I don't know. I'm still trying, brother. It's not easy. But he's been so good to me, and he's using me. Yeah. And I'm honest. I tell people I'm weak, but the Lord can help me. He can help you too.
Amen. The number is 888-318-7884. A couple lines still open, and I am going to go back to the phones in just a second here. But I want people to know, when we have Gary on, it sometimes happens that crates of these books go out. So I want you to get your copy. So here's how to get it. And this is a place where you definitely will get it wherever else you might try to look online. AveMariaPress.com. AveMariaPress.com. Because Gary's on the show with us today, they've got a promo code for you. You get 20% off on the book. Get one for yourself and for whoever else you want to help give up worry for Lent. Maybe your prayer group wants to go through Give Up Worry for Lent together. You just put in Zimak 20. That's ZIMAK 20 and get 20% off right now at AveMariaPress.com. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back with calls on Giving Up Worry for Lent with Gary Zimak on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on, Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
It is a tremendous privilege to be able to speak to so many of you and to know that so many of you are listening to the answers which we want to give you so that you can know the truth of Jesus and come to love Him more.
EWTN Open Line Wednesday with Father Mitch Pacwa. Tonight, 10 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. The Lord loves us. I mean, that's the thing. When we approach Lent, sometimes I think we think of what am I going to do for the Lord, and He wants us to think that way and to do things for Him and for the poor and for our families and all of that. But He also has many gifts. Like the Book of Ephesians tells us, He gave gifts to men, and one of the gifts is freeing us from worry, giving us that peace that surpasses understanding. And this is something that Gary Zimak discovered himself, and then he wrote the book, Give Up Worry for Lent. It's kind of like a devotional book, Gary. I'm trying to think of how to describe it, but it's a daily Bible meditation and then a reflection from you.
Yeah, and a prayer, very quick. It takes a couple of minutes each day, and we start it on Ash Wednesday, and it goes right through Easter Sunday. The hope is that by leading the readers through this, this process, after Easter is over, then it'll be more of a habit, and they can move into my next book, which is Give Up Worry for Good. That's the sequel.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I just keep writing them, man.
just give up that worry. And that's I do think something about the 40 days. It is. There's the supernatural something to the number 40, but there's also God working with our nature. And if we do something for 40 days, it does tend to embed within us. I'm going to give out the information again on where you can get it and where you can contact Gary. Then I'm going right to the phones. But we really want you to have this book, Give Up Worry for Lent. It's 20% off right now at AveMariaPress.com. When you go over there, just put in the promo code ZIMAK, ZIMAK 20. And you'll get free shipping, and you'll get 20% off. Order as many as you want. And if you just want to know more about Gary and what he does, if you maybe want to book him as a speaker, followingthetruth.com. Followingthetruth.com. And I'm going to head to the phones. Gary, that all right with you?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with Yasmin in South Bend, Indiana, listening on Redeemer Radio. Yasmin, thank you for starting us off. Go ahead with your question for Gary.
Hi. Okay, Gary. So
Hi.
I struggle a lot with bipolar depression and severe anxiety and panic disorder. And for years, I've always worried about the end of the world and the end times. And now with all of this stuff going on with Russia, I'm sorry, it makes me emotional now, with Russia and Ukraine, it's really scary for me. And it's very sad. It's heartbreaking. And I think about Matthew chapter 24, where it says, and there will be war and rumors of war, and nations will rise against nation. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing all this unfold, and I'm so worried. I'm so scared. I can't work. I can't be a mother. I can't be a wife. It's like I can't live. I can't still my mind and my soul. and it kind of makes me like angry and frustrated. And so I'm wondering, how can I kind of prioritize, my duties as a Catholic woman, a wife, and separate, those duties from my worries of the world, and trying to understand it. How can I separate that so I'm not so worried, so I'm not so anxious, so I'm not suffering and bringing my family down with me, I feel.
First, I want to say that's an excellent question, and I totally get where you're coming from. One thing before I say this is that I think Sai touched on this. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm speaking as an evangelist here, and so sometimes professional help is necessary in order to get this in order. I've worked with a lot of Catholic therapists and psychiatrists who really approve of my work and who have given out my books, but they always tell me, like, if this still doesn't work, sometimes professional help is needed. In terms of what's going on with Russia, I'm really glad you brought that up, because there are so many things in life that are beyond our control. Now, with a case like that, for the most part, it's not in our control. However, what I would say is what we do have in our control, under our control with that or with any of these other major world problems or problems in the nation, is we can pray. That's one thing I can do that nobody can take away from me. When I pray, I'm not worrying. I might be anxious, I might be afraid, but Jesus commanded us not to worry. He didn't say that we can necessarily eliminate all the anxiety from our lives. So that's the important distinction. What I would say is, and I do this all the time, I ask myself, is there anything I can do about this? If there is, and there's always prayer, but a lot of times, sometimes there is nothing else I can do, then my job is done, and then the Lord wants me to trust him. And that doesn't mean you won't be afraid. Over time, I found your fear decreases, but you do what you can, do your best, and let God do the rest. And realize that even though it doesn't seem like it, he's in control. He is totally in control of this world.
Yasmin?
Yes.
Did that help you?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Oh, God bless you,
Oh, sure.
Yasmin. Thank you for the call.
God bless you too.
Oh,
Yeah,
God bless you.
thank
And Sai, one last thing. I tell myself that at the beginning of my prayers. I say, Lord, I know you're in control. I know you see me. I know you can hear me. I know you're more powerful than any problem that I can face. He knows that, but I tend to forget it. So that self-talk is important.
Yeah, I really like that, Gary. Yasmin, thank you so much for the call. But I really like that what you just said, and I've we've talked so many times. I don't know if I've heard you say it quite that way, but is there anything else I can do? If there's nothing else I can do, my job is done. It's in the hands of the Lord. I'll move on. However I might feel about it, move on to something else.
Yeah, and that does work. And what we need to remember is we can't manufacture peace. Peace is a supernatural gift that comes to us from Jesus, and that's that's where the peace comes from. Yeah. I can't make myself feel at peace. I can make myself not worry if I open up my Bible, if I pray, if I go to Eucharistic adoration, if I go to daily Mass. I'm not worrying when I'm doing those things. I might be afraid, but I'm turning to the Lord. I'm doing something proactive about my problems.
Let's again, thank you so much, Yasmin. Let's go to Eric in St. Paul, Minnesota, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Eric, go ahead with your question for our guest, Gary Zimak.
Hi. Thank you. First of all, he said, worry is because we think we're in control. I think worry is because we think we're not in control. But the question I have is, the worries I think that we really should concern ourselves with are like relationships and finances, things that we can do something about, maybe even healings to a point. But here's my question is, okay, we say we trust in God and we believe he's going to help in this situation. We really do think we believe it, but then we worry. So my question is, does that kind of worrying negate trust, or does it negate trust somewhat? Because we're still worrying.
Yeah.
Good question, Eric. The short answer is yes. The short answer is yes. But I do want to clarify something you said. what I had said earlier was that we worry because we want to be in control, even though we're not. And that's, we want to gain that control back. And that's a tendency. I want to control the situation. The thing with trust is sometimes we think of trust as a feeling. Trust isn't a feeling. Trust is a conscious decision. One of my favorite prayers is on the bottom of the Divine Mercy image. Jesus, I trust in you. I can choose to pray that prayer even though I am scared to death, even though I think there is no way this situation can work out. I can choose to say, Jesus, I trust in you. I do it all the time. And do I feel that trust? No, not always. But the more I do that, the more my confidence in him grows. But that, that's a conscious choice. If I am worrying, if I am basically saying to myself, having a conversation with myself about things that are beyond my control, that does negate at that point my trust in God, because I'm saying to him unintentionally, I don't trust you, Lord. You're going to put me through something that is too much for me, or you can't handle this. And listen, I'm guilty of this all the time. It's a tough lesson, but that's why Jesus said, do not worry. Trust me that I'll take care of you.
888-318-7884. I mean, the apostles were right there with him, and it took them forever to learn to trust him. So yeah. I feel like we should get at least a little bit of leeway on this. I mean, Lord, I'm going to take at least as long as the apostles took. All right, like because they had you right there in the boat with them. I'm going to take at least as long as they took. You can get in touch with Gary at followingthetruth.com. He's really packed for his Lenten speaking, and Lenten speaking is Gary is something when folks like to have come and talk, because he does this Give Up Worry for Lent talk. But if you want to schedule him for 2023, I know that seems to some people like that's way out early. It's not for Gary. So if your parish would like to have Gary in 2023, go to followingthetruth.com. Followingthetruth.com. And once again, I know there are people going, I want to do this. This is going to be my thing for Lent. And if you want to do Give Up Worry for Lent, go to AveMariaPress.com. They'll give you a 20% discount on the book if you put in the promo code Zimak, Zimak 20, and they'll give you free shipping. But I think you got to do that today, right? Is that for today's orders, Gary?
Yeah.
Or is that...
What's happening? It's kind of amazing, Si, because this book is so hard to get. The people at Ave Maria, they're so good. We've got everybody on the staff there, people from all the different departments, because you and I always do so well when we talk about this book on the show. They're going to go down to the warehouse to make sure these books get shipped out, which I think is incredible.
That is wonderful.
But in order to guarantee shipping before Ash Wednesday, orders have to be in by Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay, great. And then you can start on Ash Wednesday. Just go to AveMariaPress.com, put in that promo code Zimak20, and get 20% off and get your copy of Give Up Worry for Lent, and do it. Give Up Worry for Lent. Let's go back to the phones. Let's see who we got here. We're going to Tracy right here in El Cajon, California. That's where we are, in El Cajon, California, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Tracy, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question for Gary.
I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it exactly, but my family has been going through a bunch of stuff right now, and I feel like I have two very little kids, and I feel like I have to I'm constantly I'm worrying about their well-being and their safety and whatever, and I'm putting myself in between them and whatever's going on, and I know that's a mom thing, but how do you figure out the difference between what is appropriate level of worry and protection and what is where the okay, I'm going to let you take this.
Right, exactly right. Yeah. Well, if you're standing next to a busy street, that's not the time. That's on the other side of the line. I know that. I don't have to turn that one over to Gary. But Gary, that's a great question, though. And parents, we struggle with that all the time. What do I turn over?
That hits close to home, Si and Tracy. That really does. You know what, Si? I'm going to ask you to turn the microphone off, because, Tracy, I got to tell you, I don't want anybody to hear this, but I struggle with the same thing. My weakness is my family. But here's what I found, and I heard this years ago, and I really like this. I heard that, and this is a great statement: God loves your kids more than you do. I mean, that's hard to believe, but he loves them. He wants what's best for them even more than we do. As much as we think we do, we don't get it sometimes as much as God does. It's difficult, but sometimes, and I find that prayer really helps with this. The Holy Spirit helps. Sometimes you just got to bring it to prayer and say, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I get involved? Should I back off? And sometimes, as hard as it is for me, my kids are grown, but it's still tough to back off sometimes and not try to fix everything for them. But sometimes that's really the best thing, because the Lord brings us all along. You know, it's hard to think of this with your kids. He gives us our faith, the ability to grow in the middle of the storms. That's why he sends the storms and the troubles in our lives, so that we're going to learn to turn to him. Sometimes they have to go through things. And I think if you just pray about it, use some common sense, you'll pretty much know when you shouldn't get involved, or when you should back off.
And there's the music, so we have to take a break. Tracy, thanks very much for the call. Congratulations on the 2 kids. And we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Give Up Worry for Lent. It's a book, it's a program, it's a guide. Gary Zimak, right back with him after this. Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and he desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of his will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today, or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. It's free, and you'll have instant access to our daily broadcast, the schedule of upcoming shows, and you'll even be able to search the archive and listen to thousands of past shows. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Hey, you can get a daily reflection from Gary. Gary was telling you about how he starts his day, each day, surrendering his life to the Lord and how much that means growing in peace. And certainly that is the recipe for growing in peace. And you can sign up for the daily messages from Gary. Also, that's also, you go to followingthetruth.com, right, Gary?
And just supply your email address free of charge. And that's really been very fruitful for me, Cy. People are really into this idea of the daily communication. And we're going to be going through Give Up Worry for Lent together. I'll just be highlighting every day something that's not in the book, kind of supplementing things so we can go through the program together, you know?
Wonderful. Yeah, so just followingthetruth.com is where you go for all of that. But if this is something that you're ready to allow the Lord to work in your life, that's what Gary does, and go ahead and sign up for that daily message. Followingthetruth.com. Our number here is 888-318-7884. We now go to Calvin in Oregon, watching on YouTube. Calvin, you there with us?
I'm right here. How you guys doing?
Very well, thank you.
Hey, Calvin.
Great. Well, here's a question that I've had. It's always kind of bothered me for a while. You know how they always say us Catholics, if we're Catholic, we're full of guilt.
Yes.
Catholics are full of guilt. They always say that. We're full of guilt. I was Assembly of God at one time before I became Catholic. I'll be going on 41 years of being Catholic in June.
Oh, praise God.
Yeah. Well, if you want to feel guilt, go to an Assembly of God church and tell them you went to a movie. Tell them you went to a rock concert.
So you don't think that the stereotype is true?
I went from that to having a priest who would actually go to rock concerts with me.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Where does that come from? Why are we?
You got me, Calvin. Listen. I've heard it too, and I really think that I've always had what I think you would call a guilty conscience, but I think that's a good thing, because I think that nudging of the Holy Spirit reminding me that, hey, Gary, maybe you shouldn't have said that, maybe you should have done something. I think that's a good thing, But I've heard the stereotype. I don't know where it originates from, but I think there are worse things than having a well-formed conscience.
Yeah, that's right. But I was thinking about becoming Assemblies of God, and you've ruined that for me, Calvin. Because I like movies. Well, I don't know, but
can I say one thing about this?
Yeah. Oh, wait, hang on, Calvin. Gary, go ahead. You were going to say.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit's just giving me a thought. But one of the things is a lot of anxiety and worry comes about from past sins, maybe things that we did in the past.
Oh, yeah.
And we just can't forgive ourselves. Sacrament of confession is beautiful for that. And, during Lent, now's the time. If somebody hasn't been to confession in a while, get rid of that guilt. Wipe the slate clean, and then there won't be any more worries about what we may have done in the past. Just a thought that came to me.
Calvin?
Yes, I agree totally. That's what I know I have a place to go. I don't have to be feeling guilty.
Right.
I can go and take care of it by going to confession.
That's right.
Then it's done.
Amen, brother. Amen. Well, God bless you. 41 years in the Catholic Church. I started as an infant, and I'm only ahead of you by 16 years. So we're close. You're never going to catch up to me, though. Well, maybe you will. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how that works. 888-318-7884, the number here, 888-31-TRUTH. We're talking with Gary Zimak. We do this every year before Lent. Sometimes we do it before Advent. Sometimes we do it in the summer, because I just think Gary's ministry is one of the most important ministries I am aware of. Because just think about the real world, the way the world really is. What do most people face? They face a kind of anxiety and anguish alone, and freeing people from that is one of the key works of charity, and Jesus has given us that work to do, and Gary is doing it beautifully. So if you got some worries and you want to talk about giving up worry for Lent, giving up worry for good, Gary Zimak is your man, and you can call 888-318-7884. You can go online and get the book at AveMariaPress.com right now. They're standing by to take your order. And if you use the promo code ZIMAC20, you're going to get 20% off and free shipping. Mary in Georgia, listening on the iHeartRadio app. We're glad you're here, Mary. Go ahead with your question for Gary.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Thanks for taking my call. I know, Protestants have phrases for anything, and one of them is make your misery your ministry.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I think that's what he did with you. He made your misery your ministry. But no, so I had a question about our children. Like, how can we as parents help our children who are worriers? And just on a side note, do you think that worrying is something that we learn? Like, is it a conditioned state? Because we don't want our kids to worry, and it's like grueling to see them worry so much. And then you sit there and wonder, was that my fault?
It's not the mother's fault, Mary. No. Freud always said it's the mother's fault. Freud was wrong. It's not mom's fault. But what do you do for kids who have you're in your ministry, you must get this question, Gary. The children are anxious. The children are worried. What do I do?
I get it in my own home. Mary, that's a great question. And I've had to set that example for my children who have struggled with anxiety. I think the best thing to do is to live this trust in Jesus, to let them know that that he loves us, he's in charge, and to pray with them. And I do that. My wife and I do that with my kids. And leading by example is very, very powerful. My parents didn't do that. They were good people. They went to church, but they worried a lot. And God was not real enough to them. And I think that's the problem for many of us when we get that bad medical report, when we look at the bank account, when we get some bad news. At that moment, that in-your-face problem is more real than God is. We got to flip things around, and that's why the Bible is so important. That's why trying to receive the Eucharist as much as you can is important, because the more you encounter the Lord, the more you come in touch with His truth, with His presence, the more infused you are with the grace that you need to be able to live that life and to be able to have this confidence that I don't know how this is going to turn out, but God is in charge. And that's what I try to do with my kids, and always pray with them. And let them know you believe that He's in control. And it's tough though.
Can I tell you a little story about that, Gary, about my own mother?
Sure.
Because I've always thought this was such a gift that my mother gave me, and it wasn't too long ago, but some years ago, she's in the hospital with I cannot remember if it was heart attack or because she's had several things, but it was a very serious thing she went to the hospital with. Everyone's worried, and I go to the hospital to visit her, and I didn't know what I was going to find, what kind of state she's going to be in. And the first thing she says to me is, "Tell them all, don't worry about me. One way or another, I'm getting out of this hospital. I'm either going back to the house or I'm going home." And that's how she, and I thought, what a great gift for a mother to give. Don't worry. There's nothing here to worry about. So I just want to say that because I really appreciate that my mom did that. But I think you're right that we have to model this as parents. And and if we didn't do it, and this is the thing that I always did. I didn't do a great job when they were little. Well, now they're adults, and I try to do it for them as adults. Tell them, well, I'm turning that over to Jesus. I'm not worried about it. Mary, any of that ring true with you?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Wait, did we lose Mary? I'm not sure what happened there. All right.
And you know what, Si? Sometimes you kind of fake it till you make it, as the old saying goes. Sometimes you don't feel it, but you believe it. That's what faith is. I don't always feel the Lord's presence. I don't always feel that He's going to come through. But up here in my mind, I know it through faith that He's in charge and that whatever happens is what's best. My stomach doesn't always know it, but my head does.
Again, 888-318-7884, the number 888-318-7884. Hey, it's obvious crisis in the Catholic Church, and we want to help you with it. There's lots of Catholics who don't know about Christ, His real presence in the Eucharist, so we have a free ebook for you. What the early church believed about the real presence. Visit shop.catholic.com right now. Claim your copy. It's free. What the early church believed about the real presence at shop.catholic.com.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
What have you always wanted to know about the Vatican? Well, I'm your Vatican insider, and I answer that question when I bring you the news about the Pope, Vatican City, and I share insights and stories from a broad spectrum of church ministries.
Vatican Insider with Joan Lewis, Saturday night, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Gary Zimak is here. We usually get to talk with Gary a few times a year. I don't know. It seems like it's been a while, though, Gary. I don't. Has it been?
It does.
It does. I don't
It
know.
does. Why is that, Cy? Did you lose my number?
Almost. Oh, okay. I didn't know this was going to happen on the air, but But we do that.
Now that you bring it up.
Yeah, this is a serious failing on my part. I constantly lose track of when's the last time we had so-and-so on? When's the last time we had so-and-so on? And so some of my favorite people, I'll go, oh my gosh, it's been a year since we had that person on. So I apologize for that, Gary. That is one of mine.
No, just kidding with you, man.
Yeah, all right. Okay. Well, I hope it was funny because you're not going to be on for another year. 888-318-7884, the number. Give up worry for Lent. That's Gary's book, among many books. 11 books you said you got now, Gary?
Yeah, 12th one's coming out soon. Hey, there's going to be a new one coming out after Lent. Guess what it's called? Let Go of Your Fear.
Oh.
It's a detailed look at the two storms at sea in the gospel. And I've been wanting to write this book for a long time.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah, that's coming soon.
Give up worry for Lent. If you decide, you know what, I'm going to try that this Lent. I'm going to try turning it over to Jesus and give up worry. You can get the book. You can just read it each morning, each evening, whenever you do your Lenten reflections. And in 40 days, you'll see a tremendous difference. Let's go to Kevin now in Rochester, New York, listening on the Station of the Cross. Kevin, we're so glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Gary.
Hi, Gary. Thank you for taking my
Kevin.
question. I'd like to give up Lent right now. I can't wait until Lent.
Oh, you can't wait till Lent?
I can't wait to give up worry. No.
Okay. Yeah. Good for you. Good for you.
So I was diagnosed last year with cancer and have been dealing with that and a recurrence since then. And I'm just kind of going by day. And
I'm sorry.
Frustrated over my seeming lack of faith and lack of trust. It's like, I do believe, but help my unbelief.
Yeah.
And so I'm going through my days and worrying about time I might miss with my family and my wife and watching my kids grow up. But at the same time, all that worrying I'm doing in the present, it seems like I'm letting that time slip away right now. And I don't know if you had any
I see what you're saying.
For me, Gary.
Right, because you're preoccupied.
Yeah. Right.
Kevin, first of all, thank you for calling. Here's the first thing I want to say. I'm going to be praying for you, brother, and I know Cy is, and everybody at Catholic Answers, and I know everybody listening would be happy to pray for you. Jesus can absolutely heal you. We don't know when, we don't know how, but he can heal you. I mean, that can happen. Your problem can be taken away. But, in terms of the worry, and I'm going to pray for your complete healing, and we'll leave the details up to the Lord. But in terms of beating yourself up for wasting time or giving into anxiety over this, what I would do is say, first of all, don't feel that pressure, because if you look at Jesus on the night before he died, in his agony in the garden, he really struggled with this, and in his humanity, he struggled with his impending suffering and death. And he said a prayer that we should all remember: Father, take this away from me, but your will be done. So it's perfectly acceptable to say, take it away, and to, at the same time, to yield to the Lord's will. It's normal to fear death. It's normal to fear illness. It's normal to fear pain and suffering. That's a normal human weakness that we all go through. What's more important is the fact that you desire to overcome this, that you desire to show your faith, that you want to show the Lord you trust him. He wants your will. And by you having that desire, that's exactly what you're doing. So you pray about it. You keep turning to him. You keep saying, Lord, help me. And when you fall down, don't beat yourself up, because we all do it, and that's totally acceptable because we're human.
Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's just I feel like sometimes I've been going to daily mass, and I feel like I'm dragging myself there, and it's almost I look for some consolation at time during mass, but at times it's almost going there. It's almost I've got this woe is me attitude, and I just want to get rid of that. I want to get rid of that and be stronger, and again have my faith be increased.
You know, Kevin, you're going to daily mass. That is making the Lord so happy. You are pleasing him. You're going even though you don't feel like it. What a great sacrifice. What an act of love. And, ask him to take that, the woe is me attitude away. He may do it. He may take a while. But the fact that you're going through that, you're doing it, that's faith, brother. That's faith. You're exercising your faith. Sometimes when you are exercising your faith, it doesn't always feel good.
No.
Right? So
you don't feel
I'm
it.
proud of you, man.
But obviously you have a powerful faith because your faith is an act of the will. And the will is getting up and going to mass every morning. So sometimes we don't recognize that we have the thing because it can't be that simple just to will to be in contact with Jesus. That's faith. Yes, in fact, that is faith.
It is. It is.
Have we got? I'd like to send him a copy of Father's book because he said he's going to give up worry for Lent. But Father's book, The Secrets from Heaven book, the one on the parables and conversations of Jesus. I think that would be Kevin. Hang on, we'll send it to you if you'd like it. I think that it's just such a beautiful, long book length meditation on just the things people said in his conversations with people, and it's beautiful. So we'd love you to have it. Where am I going now? I don't remember. I'm Kevin again. Thank you for the call. Let's go to Tom in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on KVSS Spirit Catholic Radio. Tom, go ahead with your question for Gary. For Gary Zimak.
Very much. Thank you very much. I don't have worry about the major things. Those I can give to the Lord, no problem, just whatever. But it's the little daily things that if I don't worry about them, I won't do them or I won't take care of them. They'll just, slip away. So advice, please. What do you say?
So are you saying that the worry is keeping you from being a couch potato? Because if you weren't worried about these things, you'd just sit there and do nothing?
Well, no, I probably wouldn't sit there and do nothing, but I'd do something I'd rather do.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
but the snow wouldn't get shoveled, in other words.
Right, all right, exactly. I don't worry about it's the major things do not worry me. It's the little things when I worry about, I got to get the car serviced or something. It's just, if it didn't worry me, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Gary?
Oh, man, where do I start? Tom, I can so relate to that. It's these so-called little things, like getting my taxes done, like getting my car serviced. Oh, those things. Sometimes they just drive me crazy. Well, a couple of things about that. Number one, we want to differentiate between worry and concern. Concern's a good thing. But we don't want that concern over the things that have to get done to just snowball so that we have this endless conversation with ourselves called worry. I found, and I'm going to credit my wife Eileen with this. I think she's listening in the car right now. She always has this philosophy, because I tend to get overwhelmed when I have too much on my to-do list. She would always tell me, and she still does, just do one thing. You'll feel better if you do one thing. So, we can only do one thing at a time. Pick out that one thing, start with that one thing, and then when that's done, go on to the second. It's such a simple piece of advice, but it really helps me.
But that definition you gave Tom of worry, could you say that an endless conversation with ourselves?
Yeah, worry is a conversation with ourselves about things we can't change. And I also heard the flip side of that is prayer is a conversation with God about things that he can change. So, you got those two things. I can't fix a lot of these things. But I think the things Tom is talking about, they're within his control a lot of times. It's just a matter of the list can be so long. I got to cut the lawn. I got to wash the car. I got to do so many things. And, do one and then it gets a little better. But I'm the same way. I get overwhelmed when my list is too long.
Tom, I'm going to say thanks and keep moving because I just looked at the clock and we got a lot of callers on to do in just a few minutes. But thanks. I hope that was helpful to you. Give Up Worry for Lent. That's Gary Zimak's book. It's available right now at AveMariaPress.com. If you order it there tomorrow, it'll get to you by Ash Wednesday, and you can spend the 40 days of Lent giving up worry. Give Up Worry for Lent. AveMariaPress.com. Use the promo code ZIMAK, ZIMAK 20, and you'll get 20% off and free shipping. Let's go to Dave in Phoenix, Arizona, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Dave, glad to have you. Go ahead with your question for Gary.
Yeah, I just had a question about sort of the constrained trust and the worry as far as, you worry that you can kick back and do nothing and just say everything is in God's hands, and I'll just kick back and let things happen, versus getting involved in doing stuff. But where's that line drawn? And or worry about not doing enough to build God's kingdom.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It did to me. Gary, make sense to you?
Yeah, that's challenging sometimes, Dave. But here's my philosophy about that. I always ask myself a question when faced with a potential anxiety-producing situation. Is there anything I can do about this? If there is, then I do it. If not, then I just bring it to the Lord, because obviously He wants me to trust Him. Sometimes that changes each day. So I might not be able to do something about my particular area of concern today, but I pray about it again tomorrow, because that might change. He might give me something that I can do. But it's a matter of trying to determine, is there anything I can do to fix this, to make it go away? Well, then do it. And then in the meantime, if you can't, you can always pray and say, Lord, please help this situation. But it's hard to find that line sometimes.
Yeah, but like it's like the parents who have called, like you wouldn't want to be the kind of to be parenting in a way it's like, I don't care what happens to the kids.
No.
But you don't want to be parenting in a way where you're overwhelmed with anxiety about the kids.
That's why that personal relationship with Jesus is so important. I got to talk to Him every day. And, I found that one of the most effective times to ask for advice is right after I've received Holy Communion, or when I'm sitting in front of the Blessed Sacrament. Because I have gotten so many answers so quickly when I brought things to Him like that. But it's a daily. He wants us to turn to Him every day and say, Lord, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. What should I do? Should I do anything? And that's how He develops His relationship with us. He knows that we need Him, and He wants us to turn to Him. And if there's something that I can do, I do it. If not, okay, Lord, this one's in your hands.
Dave, as I said before, I want to try to get to everybody before we have to go, so I'm going to leave it there. God bless you, and thank you for that call and the question. Adam in South Lebanon, Ohio, on Sacred Heart Radio. You're going to have to be a little bit quick, Adam, if we're going to get you an answer.
Sure. To cut it to the chase, I would like to know how in the world do we balance the anxiety and worrying, and then the other extreme, well, I'm just shutting down because I'm so overwhelmed, and by the way, I don't really give a darn about your situation when I really should be giving a darn.
Yeah.
I just get so angry and just shut down like a nuclear reactor.
Again, Adam, that's a great question, and that comes down to that balance and that constant communication with the Lord. And I'm guilty of this sometimes. I don't always do this as well as I should, but just to turn to Him and say, Lord, is there something I can do about this? Do you want me to do something? And I always use the approach with Him that, okay, Lord, I'm really dense. You have to be very obvious with me, because I'm going to miss what you're saying. Of course, He already knows that because He created me. But, and He'll let you know, because wouldn't that be mean of Him if He wanted you to do something but wouldn't tell you? He knows who He's dealing with. And if there's something you're supposed to do, He's going to tell you. But the tricky thing is, for me and probably for you, Adam, is we got to back away sometimes and give up that control and say, Lord, this one's in your hands.
Adam, I'm going to leave it there. I think there's so much more we could talk about there. I hope maybe you'll get Gary's book, Give Up Worry for Lent, or Give Up Worry for Good. But we are just about out of time with Gary Zimak, and I want to encourage folks. As I've said before, my wife found this very helpful as a Lenten practice. It might be in addition to other things that you do for Lent. Maybe this is the primary thing that you'll do this Lent. But I want to let you know, again, where you can get in touch with Gary and get the book if you want to give up worry for Lent. Just go to AveMariaPress.com. Put in the promo code ZIMAC20 when you check out, and you'll get 20% off. And if you order today or tomorrow, they'll get it to you by Ash Wednesday. And you can each morning or each evening or middle of the day or whenever you do your devotions, just read what Gary has there and meditate upon it. And 40 days, give up worry for Lent. AveMariaPress.com. If you'd like to get the daily reflections from Gary Zimak, go to followingthetruth.com, followingthetruth.com, and Book them now for the 2023 Lent, because Gary is very busy in Lent, and you can do that too at followingthetruth.com. Did I get it all in, Gary, or is there anything else?
You did great, Si. Thank you so much. And I always encourage people, if you need anything, just reach out to me. I'd be happy to hear from you. And I always pray for everybody who reads my work every day. So you're in my prayers. You too, Si.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you very, very much. And thanks for 4 years of this hour that we do together.
Man.
I hope we'll keep doing it for years. And maybe fight this plague of worry that we have, which is so contrary to the gospel. It is not what the Lord wants for his children, all this worry.
Amen, brother. Thank you so much, Si. I really appreciate you letting me come on.
Thank you, Gary. We're going to talk about papal infallibility next with apologist Michael Lofton. Your call's welcome, 888-318-7884. Right back after this. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Thanks again to Gary Zimak helping us give up worry for Lent. This hour, we're going to talk a bit about papal infallibility. This is actually one of the sticking points for many people when it comes to the Catholic faith. Not too many people have a sticking point where it's like, I don't know about this loving each other thing. I don't know about this trusting in God. But there are sticking points, and we know. Because you listen to this program, what many of them are: purgatory for many people, the role of Mary for many people, hell is one for many people. And one of the things that sticks in the craw of quite a few people is this Catholic claim, and to others it doesn't stick in the craw, it just seems silly, this Catholic claim that there is such a thing as papal infallibility. What is that all about? Why do we claim this papal infallibility? How does it work? How many times has it been exercised? As a matter of fact, you'll often hear the claim, it's only been used twice. And that's almost a way of saying, I feel like that's almost a way of covering our Catholic embarrassment. Like, we've only used it twice, meaning it's not that big a deal. You don't have to worry about it. So we got a wonderful guest for you this hour. If you've got questions about papal infallibility, whether you are Protestant or Orthodox or Catholic or not Christian at all, 888-318-7884. Michael Lofton, a very fine apologist, and he's the proprietor of Reason and Theology online. You can find his podcast, Reason and Theology. Michael Lofton, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me on site. It's an honor.
Again, I have to ask you this every time I see you there. Have you read all those books behind you, or are they props?
A handful of them.
Oh, you've read a handful of them.
Some people make jokes and think that they're actually made of cardboard. And
yeah.
They think it's just a prop. So I've done videos where I go and I pull my cardboard books off the shelf. So.
I remember when I had the great honor of being on your program, and I tried to get you to put my book back there, and you're like, no, this is a match set. I'm not sticking your book in there. This is a match set of the Church Fathers. Yeah, well, okay, I don't belong with the Church Fathers.
But see, my contention was a little bit more specific than that. These are all hardbacks, and you have a solid paperback, so it was kind of,
You'll have to pardon me if I thought that was kind of an excuse. Yeah,
no, it wasn't.
888-318-7884 is a number. What is this papal fallibility thing all about? Michael Lofton is our guest. Michael, first of all, maybe we could just start with the Pope's only ever exercised this infallibility twice. Is that right?
I don't take that position, but I know that that's a very common position that we find online, but I kind of think it's one of those popular myths. Mm-hmm. It's kind of curious because there aren't any magisterial documents of the church saying that papal infallibility has only been employed 2 times in church history. In fact, what you do find is prominent figures such as Bishop Gasser at the First Vatican Council, which defined papal infallibility. You have figures like Bishop Gasser. He maybe exaggerates a little bit, but he takes the position that there are thousands and thousands of infallible decrees that have been issued from the Holy See. Now, again, we might say a little bit that he's exaggerating there, but he clearly wasn't under the impression that there were only 2 instances. Yeah. To my knowledge, this idea of 2 papal infallibly taught teachings comes from, it seems like Karl Rahner. Now, I have heard that a group of theologians in a joint declaration or a joint document between Catholics and Lutherans noted that there have only been 2 instances. There is that claim, but of course this is not anything magisterial. But there's also Rahner who indicates that there are at least 2 teachings that are taught by the Pope infallibly that are not in dispute. So he's kind of open to the idea that there's more than 2, but he wants to say that there's 2 indisputable cases. To my knowledge, that's probably the source of this claim.
I see.
And that's Rahner's opinion, and I don't think it's a very good one, because I think when we look at the facts, there are many more instances of papal infallibility aside from the 2 that he would mention, which are, of course, going to be Pius IX on the Immaculate Conception and Pius XII on the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And perhaps we can go into some detail on what some of those other instances are. But I think if you at least consider the fact that papal canonizations are generally considered to be infallible, that blows the whole 2 instances myth out of the water.
Yeah, indeed. 888-318-7884, the number 888-318-7884. We're talking about papal infallibility with apologist Michael Lofton. Michael, I should have mentioned this to folks before. We have the great honor of having you as an associate apologist here at Catholic Answers. Not the same as a staff apologist, because you have other things that you're doing, but an associate apologist means that we get to call on you, and you're nice enough to come on the show, and we get to claim you as one of ours and say, look at how brilliant we are, all those things that Michael Lofton says. So we're really glad and proud to have you as an associate.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited about that as well. As I've mentioned, I know in previous conversations that you and I have had, Catholic Answers was really influential in my conversion to Catholicism. So it's really an honor to be on board in this capacity.
Again, we're talking papal infallibility, 888-318-7884. So do you take at least the possibility that my thesis is correct, that there's something that about Catholics that's almost embarrassed, especially in the ecumenical setting, about papal infallibility? That's why we do the, it's only been used twice kind of thing.
I think you're spot on there. And in fact, that's why the first time that we encounter the claim that this has only been employed twice is in a dialogue with Lutherans. To my knowledge, that's the first time.
Yeah.
But it's in the context of a dialogue with Lutherans. I think that what it is sometimes as Catholics, we know that Protestants don't accept papal infallibility, so we try to downplay it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's partly where it comes from. I think another reason is because sometimes we hear popes say things that maybe isn't always spot on. And so we're looking for ways to kind of guard against the idea that we have to accept everything that a pope says. And one of the ways in which people tend to do that is they want to restrict papal infallibility to very few instances. So I think that's kind of where it comes from. So I think you're definitely onto something there.
Maybe liberal Catholics are less enthusiastic about papal infallibility when Benedict is the Pope, and conservative Catholics are less enthusiastic about it when Francis is the Pope. But it doesn't have to do with those things. It has to do with the things that we all share, not the things that we that are necessary, in other words, for the faith, not the things that are more peripheral or prudential or sometimes just an opinion.
You're correct, because the extent of papal infallibility goes only insofar as the teaching is either revealed by God or it's something that is necessary to preserve historically or logically to preserve something that is taught by God. So it's historically or logically necessary to maintain in order to preserve something that God has taught. That's the extent of papal infallibility. Of course, papal infallibility doesn't apply to the Pope's preference when it comes to music or something like that. It's obviously going to be on matters of faith and morals only, and insofar as it is something that has been revealed by God or is necessary to maintain to preserve something that has been revealed by God.
Again, I remember 888-318-7884. I am going to allow callers an opportunity to get on with Michael Lofton and ask your questions. 888-318-7884. But I just want to clarify some things before we do go to the phones. And so if your position is that it doesn't seem likely that there's only been 2 instances of papal infallibility being invoked or used or being practiced, I suppose would be the proper way to say it. So how often do you think it is? And what are some things that you think are infallibly declared by popes?
That's an excellent question. I do think that it's still something that does not happen frequently. Mm-hmm. But that's in the context of the papacy teaching, thousands and thousands of propositions, right? So when we speak about a minority of propositions here, it's much larger than 2, but it is a lot less than all of the teachings that the Holy See has proposed in 2,000 years. Now, you ask about some examples. going to the first millennium, where you have theologians like Saliveri, who is a manualist in the preconciliar era, he notes in his book, or his Summa on Sacred Theology, over 20 instances in the first millennium alone. Actually, from the time of Pope Damasus 380 to the end of Nicaea 787, Nicaea II. He wants to say there's over 20 instances of papal infallibility. And you know what? In the majority of cases, I think he's right. One example would be Pope Leo the Great in the 400s. Right before the Council of Chalcedon, there's this dispute on, does Christ have one nature? Does he have two natures? And a group of individuals asked the Holy See, Pope Leo, for him to weigh in on the matter. And he wrote his tome to Patriarch Flavian. It's called the Tome of Leo, or the Tome of Flavian. And he intervenes, and he infallibly teaches that he has two natures. And of course, this was received at the Council of Chalcedon. But according to Leo, if you look in his letters, I think it's letter 82 and 37 among some of his other letters, he thinks that an ecumenical council isn't even needed. He has already issued a definitive intervention on the matter. He thinks that he has already taught infallibly. And that was definitely received by others in an infallible way. So I think that would be one instance. Another one would be Pope Agatho at the Sixth Ecumenical Council. He writes to the emperor a letter offering a profession of faith on the question of whether or not Jesus has one will or two wills. And he definitively teaches that he has two wills. And of course, this is read at the council and received. But as even Orthodox historians like Dr. Edward Sachinski note, Agatho thought that this was already definitively settled before the Sixth Ecumenical Council even read his letter. He thought it was already settled because of a previous pope, Pope Martin, at the Synod in Rome, Lateran Synod in 649. He had already issued an infallible decree on this matter. So there are at least a half a dozen, if not more, instances in the first millennium where they taught infallibly.
Extraordinary. 888-318-7884. That's really extraordinary, and it suggests that some of the things that, I almost feel like this might be a point of dialogue with Protestants, where we might say, some of the Christological things that you were just talking about, and maybe other things too, maybe things on the nature of the Trinity and whatnot. These are that the papacy has in fact played a role in handing these traditions down faithfully, and that's why when you go into the a Methodist church today, they're able to teach that Christ has two wills, for example, or is a single person with two natures, those kinds, because you don't see that language in the Bible. Maybe a little more, this provides an opportunity to talk about the role of the papacy in the promulgation of the faith.
Most certainly. If you maintain that Jesus has two natures, you can thank Pope Leo for that. Among other Christological doctrines, that you're right, they might be implicit in Scripture, but that's the difficulty. If they're implicit, there's room for contention. Right? Yeah. So you have to have some kind of organism or mechanism that can definitively arbitrate between these theological disputes. And the papacy is one of them. It's not the only. Of course, you have ecumenical councils as well, so the bishops universally. But it is definitely one of them. And so I think you're right. There's quite a few doctrines that some Protestants maintain that they actually can thank popes and ecumenical councils for.
And I'm sure there are many that would. There's not always ill will there, but it is a point. If we talk about the actual history of the church and the role of the papacy, we see that this invocation or this even assumption. It sounds like in the first millennium, it's almost an assumption that if the Pope says definitively some matter of the faith like this, a doctrine, is settled, then it's in fact settled, and we can all move on. It sounds like an assumption, not more than it is an assertion.
That was definitely the position of quite a few people in the first millennium, which is why they wrote to the Holy See asking for a definitive decision on certain matters that were in dispute. It's not the only mechanism. I mean, again, you do have ecumenical councils in the first millennium, but those are intimately bound with the papacy anyway. But you're right. Quite a few people wrote to popes asking for magisterial interventions because they had that assumption, and even more popes believed that they had that authority. Right. So there's that attestation as well.
Yeah. Although I can see that the counter argument, well, just because the Pope thinks he's got this, but well, okay, yeah, but the fact is, the way that it turned out, what you see is the beauty of the Christian faith being promoted by this papal infallibility again and again and again, and not stifled by it.
Yes, and I would also say, for those who might object and say, well, just because a pope thinks that they have this authority doesn't necessarily make it true. But then we have to kind of take a step back and ask the question, okay, well, whenever Jesus teaches in Matthew 16 or Luke 22 certain things, how do we properly understand that? And does that apply today to the papacy? In order to really answer that question in any kind of meaningful way, you're going to eventually have to have some kind of organ that is authoritative, that can teach with the authority of Christ. That's the magisterium. And part and parcel of the magisterium is going to be the papacy. So I would say, without the papacy and without papal infallibility, ultimately you're going to be in a position where it's really your opinion versus somebody else's opinion on the proper interpretation of Scripture, not to mention the fact that we have to even discuss how do we determine which books belong in Scripture. All
right, I've been really rude to callers because we got a new associate apologist here at Catholic Answers, Michael Lofton, so I just wanted to talk with him, but callers can take over when we come back. If you've got questions, maybe you have some challenges for Michael Lofton on the infallibility of popes, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
You know, we talk story with each of our very unique guests for the whole hour, so that you can go deep with us as you yourself pursue your own story of heroic virtue, and as you pursue intimacy with God.
The Bear Wozniak Adventure, Saturday night, 6 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. The gift of infallibility. That is a gift possessed by the magisterium of the Catholic Church, invested most particularly in the Pope. And we believe it. We're not embarrassed of it. We're grateful for it. But it's one that's can really be a tough nut to crack. It's hard to understand. It's hard to be clear on what exactly it all means. And it's certainly something that's hard to talk about with our brothers and sisters in the faith, and also those outside the Christian faith. What exactly is all of this about? It seems very, almost in a sense, I think to non-Christians, it seems like a magical claim. It's none of those things. But here to talk about papal infallibility, Michael Lofton. You can find his podcast, Reason and Theology. Do you have another podcast too, or is that the...
That's it.
Reason and Theology. All right. You're just so good. I just think you should have more. I don't know why I thought you had more.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I know what it is. You have an institute.
Yeah, St. Maximus the Confessor Institute, where I bring different theologians who come on and offer free lectures. So.
All right, so let's go to Matthew in Oklahoma, listening on Catholic.com. Glad to have you, Matthew. Go ahead with your question for our guest, Michael Lofton.
All right, thanks for having me. So since all the hard limits and facts about papal infallibility and all the hard limits were put in place in Vatican I, unless I'm mistaken, how was a Christian in the year, say, 600 or 1200 supposed to know what things that come from the Pope are and are not infallible?
Yeah, this is an excellent question, and it's actually something that I've heard Protestant apologists raise in debates, because they'll say something like, well, you have the case of Honorius, Pope Honorius, right, in the 7th century, who allegedly offers a magisterial intervention on the question of does Jesus have two wills, and he seems to indicate something that isn't necessarily in accord with orthodoxy. So if you had been alive at that time and had simply trusted in the Pope, you would have been in trouble. Well, I would say this: you're right to ask this, because it's definitely the case that the parameters weren't clearly defined in the first millennium. The concept was there that there are magisterial interventions offered by the Holy See that are definitive. I would also say the concept was also there that not all of their interventions were considered definitive, and that accounts for the case of Honorius. But what do you do if you're living in 600 and you don't have access to the First Vatican Council and the criteria listed out there? Yeah, I think that ordinarily speaking, if you trust the magisterium, and this goes not only for papal interventions, it also goes for conciliar interventions, ecumenical councils. If you trust what they're going to teach you or what they tell you, I don't think that you're putting your soul at peril. Perhaps it might be that you have assented to a proposition that wasn't one that employed papal infallibility. Perhaps. I think that would be incredibly extraordinary. But if that were the case, I don't think God is going to hold you accountable. But this is one of the reasons why we did develop this issue in the second millennium when it comes to criteria of determining, okay, well, when is a pope infallible and when is he not? Because people are going to have questions. Okay, is this a definitive magisterial intervention or not?
Matthew, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Thank you.
Okay, good. Satisfied customer. Now I'm even more happy that we have Michael Lofton as an associate of Catholic Answers, associate apologist. He's satisfied. One caller. He's batting 1,000. I don't even know if we should do any more calls, Michael, because you're batting 1,000.
That's it. I'm going to retire. Yeah.
At the moment, you're our highest ranked apologist. Anything from here is going to go downhill. Brendan in Silver Springs, Maryland, watching on Twitch. We're glad to have you, Brendan. Go ahead with your question for Michael Lofton.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So how do we explain the infallibility of the Pope, I guess usually to other Catholics, in a way that, while deals with the limitations but doesn't turn those limitations of it into an excuse to just ignore anything else the Pope says?
Yeah, it's a good question because this is definitely a tendency that we have these days, right? Well, I think that if we use the criteria that the First Vatican Council gives, we're able to exclude a lot of magisterial, or at least papal propositions from being infallible. So we're able to say, okay, well, actually, this wasn't something infallible that maybe Pope Francis taught on an interview on a papal airplane or something like that. So it does limit the scope of papal infallibility, but at the same time, we want to avoid the other extreme, which is to say, well, if it's not infallible, I don't have to assent to it. See, that's the difficulty. A lot of times we want to say, well, it isn't something that lines up with Vatican I's criteria for papal infallibility, therefore it's up for grabs and I don't have to assent to it. I think we have to avoid that extreme as well and say, well, but if it's taught authoritatively, even if it's non-definitive, even if it's not infallible, there's still a level of assent that's generally going to be owed to the proposition. Does that answer the question sufficiently?
I think so. Like, it's when I read Vatican I, it seems like the thrust of it is the Pope has something important to say on a lot of matters, and it seems like I encounter a lot of people that want to say that, well, but if it's not infallible, we don't have to care.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to exactly get.
Let me if I could
a site to tell them like, hey, but this is saying to acknowledge his other things when he's speaking to the church or whatever.
Well, I want to interrupt you just real quick, Brendan, and ask something, because it seems to me that thing that you just said about when the Pope is speaking to the church has changed significantly, or has a changed factor since the papacy of John Paul II, in which there was much more informal communication from popes than there had been before. Writing books as Pope John Paul II that are just they're books. They're not papal documents in any way. They're personal books that he wrote. And then the interviews this continued with Benedict, and then certainly under Francis, lots and lots of informal communication. So I feel like in response to that, people are struggling with, how much am I supposed to be listening to the Pope? Like, which things? Brendan, what do you think of that? And I'll go back to you, Michael.
I mean, I see people wanting to ignore encyclicals and apostolic letters and anything else too. So.
Yep. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah, Brendan, if I understand you correctly, you're effectively asking, well, how do we know if something is authoritative and if I'm to give some kind of assent to what the Pope teaches? Is that effectively it?
Yeah, I guess just like how is there something I guess we can do to bring to these people, say like, this isn't something new that the church has dealt with. We've said before that these other authoritative things are still something you need to take seriously, which I think Vatican I gets at, but I'm talking to people that have read Vatican I, and they it doesn't seem to be. I don't know how to explain to them that that's what's in there.
Well, we could start with Pius XII in Humani Generis. He explicitly notes that even in instances where a pope is not teaching infallibly, perhaps he's just teaching in an encyclical, those things are authoritative and demand a certain assent.
Do you want? I know you heard the music, Michael. You want a little more time on that when we come back on the other side? Okay, we'll continue.
That'd be good. Yeah.
We'll continue because that music kind of cuts us off a little bit. And this is such a good conversation. I really appreciate the call. We'll take a quick break, right back, and continue our conversation with Michael Lofton on papal infallibility.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. Brendan in Silver Springs, Maryland. We're just having a great conversation. We really appreciate the call, Brendan, and the points that you're making, because we're talking about papal infallibility, and Brendan's making the point, and please correct me if I butcher this, Brendan, but it seems to me that a good portion of your point is, well, if we are solely focused on papal infallibility, lots of people think they don't really have to listen to the Pope except when he, shouts, "This is infallible, the following," and then I got to listen, but I don't have to listen to all the other stuff. Brendan?
That's basically the problem that I've encountered and tried to deal with. How to get around.
And Michael is actually working on a PhD thesis on this very point. But as I was saying to you at the break, Michael, I mean, when you have a pope like Pope John Paul II, who publishes poetry, then this is bound to be confusing to the faithful about what do I do with a papal poem? I mean, at what level of authority or attention must I give it?
A papal poem wouldn't have any kind of magisterial authority unless the Pope were to say, okay, my poems from now on have, at the very least, an authoritative degree of authority, because those are not known to be settings in which the Pope speaks as the Pope. and teaches as the Pope.
I gotcha. Okay.
So he normally speaks in the setting of an encyclical or something along those lines. So it's not understood to be authoritative unless he were to say, hey, this is a new way in which I'm going to speak authoritatively. Now, as to your question, Brendan, I would point you to Lumen Gentium 25. This is a document issued by the Second Vatican Council. Paragraph 25 goes into the magisterium. In fact, this is the part from the magisterium that speaks most about the magisterium compared to any other magisterial document. I know I just used the word magisterium probably like 4 times there in one sentence, but
it was majestic.
I hate to quote things to you, but I really want to quote something. It'll be very brief, but here's what it says at the very end of Lumen Gentium 25, and it really gets at the heart of the question. This religious submission of mind and will must be shown in a special way to the authentic magisterium of the Roman Pontiff, even when he's not speaking ex cathedra, so even when he's not speaking infallibly. That is, it must be shown in such a way that his supreme magisterium is acknowledged with reverence, the judgments made by him sincerely adhered to according to his manifest mind and will. And it goes on, but the point is this: it explicitly notes that there is a religious submission of intellect and will that is to be given to papal teachings, even when they're not ex cathedra, as long as they're authoritative, as long as it's clear that he's teaching as the Pope and he's in fact teaching something, there is a level of assent owed. Again, it's called religious submission of intellect and will, which is where you conform your intellect voluntarily with your will. You conform your intellect to what is proposed. You assent to it. Perhaps you don't assent to it with the same assent that you would give to something in sacred scripture, but there is some assent that is to be given here. So you can't just say, well, if it's not taught infallibly by the Pope, I can ignore it. No, there are several magisterial interventions saying that a certain level of assent is still required.
Brendan, that all sit with you okay?
Yeah, that's great, and I appreciate the quoting of church councils. So thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the conversation, Brendan, very much. We're talking papal infallibility with Michael Lofton. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884. It does not all have to be, you read, this or that council. If you have basic questions about papal infallibility, they're very welcome. That's what we do all the time, and we love doing it. So if you're not a Catholic and you'd like some clarity on what we're talking about, maybe you're not a Christian person and you'd like some clarity on who's the Pope and what is this infallibility thing, or if you have kind of advanced, I've been reading a lot questions, as Brendan had. Those are welcome too. 888-318-7884. Now we're going to Josh in Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Glad to have you, Josh. Go ahead with your question for Michael.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. I have a quick question. So my cousin and her husband live in Kansas City, and they have started to attend a Society of Christ the King parish that is like independent. They are not under any jurisdiction, which I essentially have come to understand means that they don't accept the Pope or like papal infallibility or anything. So is it even okay for me, even though that they call themselves a Catholic parish, is it even okay for me to attend a church like that with them if I were to be invited, since they don't accept papal infallibility or are even under the jurisdiction of the Pope?
So I'm not familiar with Society of Christ the King. I know of an Institute of Christ the King, which is in full communion with the Holy See and does affirm papal infallibility. And I know of the Society of St. Pius X, whose canonical relationship with the Holy See is shaky, but they do affirm papal infallibility. So I'm not familiar with Society of Christ the King. But in general, if you're speaking about some community that is not in communion with the Holy See and perhaps even denies something like papal infallibility or some other Catholic dogma, you ask the question, can you attend? Well, you especially since the time of the Second Vatican Council, Vatican II itself notes, and also this can be found in canon law, you can attend as long as it's, number one, not going to cause some kind of scandal, as long as it's not going to lead you astray from the faith. You could attend non-Catholic Christian services. Canon law does note that if it's physically or morally impossible for you to receive the sacraments from a Catholic priest, you could receive the sacraments from a non-Catholic priest who has apostolic succession and has been validly ordained. But does it fulfill your mass obligation? Generally speaking, if you're a Latin Rite Catholic, probably not. But if you're just asking, could you attend, Yes, but you need to be cautious, right? I mean, if they're denying dogmas of the Catholic faith, be cautious, right? Because oftentimes those things have a tendency to pull us away from the faith rather than us pull them closer to the faith. So does that help?
Yeah, so it just said on their website, because I did some research, that they were not under the jurisdiction of the Pope, and so I wasn't really sure what that exactly meant, because they did have a tab like about how they were still Catholic and how they had apostolic succession, but that they were not under the jurisdiction of the Pope. And so I was kind of curious, if they're not under that jurisdiction, then do they sort of deny or deny papal infallibility and the power of the Pope to speak infallibly? So that was kind of my question. So I guess I'm still a little bit confused about the church, I guess, in general, because there's not very many of them. There's only 10 across the country, and one of them is in Kansas City, and I think it's called Christ the King Parish, which is why I think I had gotten the idea of the Society of Christ the King or whatever it was called. But you could be correct. I'm just, like I said, I'm just confused and don't really know how to sort of process that invite anyway, because I am a Latin Rite Catholic, and so that's why I was confused as to whether or not you could even go if they're not under any jurisdiction of a diocese or the Pope. So that was my question.
Yeah, so I wonder if they're old Catholics or sedevacantist. That's definitely curious. But if they in fact do have apostolic succession, there are limited cases where you could receive the sacraments and you could attend their services, but it would not fulfill your Sunday obligation ordinarily. And you ought to be very cautious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the church isn't saying you can't go, but definitely be cautious.
Yeah, that's kind of a red flag, isn't it?
It definitely is, because there's a lack of perfection there. If you're not in communion with the Holy See, you're missing something that Christ instituted.
Thanks, Josh. I hope that was helpful to you. We're talking about the infallibility of the Pope. And if you have questions about that, whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Jim in Minneapolis is next, listening on EWTN.com. Jim, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Michael.
Yeah, I apologize that I didn't hear most of your program, so if I'm repeating something someone asked, you can ignore it. My question is, what can one pope overrule of another, such as encyclicals or edicts? I know that infallibility and dogma is not going to be what I'm referring to, but they make some rather strong statements, and it's hard to know what absolutely. Can you give me some examples of where they may have done that?
I just want to let you know before I turn that over to Michael, that was not a repeat at all. This is completely new information. So you nailed it, Jim. All right, what can one pope throw out from the previous pope or previous popes?
Jim, you're officially my favorite person, because you just asked the question that I love to talk most about.
What?
So,
really?
and this was not orchestrated. But yeah, great question. So, you're right to note a pope cannot overturn something that has been taught dogmatically, right? So he can't overturn anything that's infallible or definitive. That's impossible. No pope has that authority. He can't overturn sacred scripture. Dei Verbum from the Second Vatican Council in paragraph 10 is explicit about that. The pope is underneath scripture, underneath sacred tradition. He serves it. He is not over it. So he can't overrule scripture or change sacred tradition. You're right about that. He can't overturn, as you noted, something that has been definitively taught by a previous pope. But here's the thing. Very technically, he could overturn a teaching of a pope that was taught non-definitively, non-infallibly. It is possible that he could do that by virtue of the fact that a pope can teach something non-infallibly, as we just read from Lumen Gentium from the Second Vatican Council, and we know that not everything is ex cathedra. So he can teach something non-infallibly. If he can teach something non-infallibly, by definition, it can be reversed by the magisterium, which would include the Pope. So the Pope technically could overturn something that was non-definitively taught previously by another Pope. Now, whether or not this has ever happened, that's a different question. I personally maintain the position that no, that has never happened on a matter of doctrine. Now, there have been reversals by the Pope of other popes when it comes to matters of discipline. There are plenty of those. But has a pope ever overturned a non-definitive teaching by a previous pope? He could, but I personally am going to take the position that he hasn't, and I think the burden of proof is on people to show that he has.
All right, Jim, is that a satisfactory answer to you, or was there something else you're looking for?
Oh, yeah. I'm just going to throw a couple things in. You don't have to talk about them, but such as Pope John Paul II, he said invincible ignorance on contraception is like in the confessional telling the priest. And the other one might be capital punishment. If one says you cannot and another says no, we still allow it. But you don't have to go into that. I get the question.
I'm actually interested in that because I appreciate that, Jim. So these are very recent examples where Pope John Paul said certain things, and then Pope Francis, the capital punishment is the way the wording is phrased in regard to capital punishment in the catechism. That was changed. And then now, as I said that, I just forgot what the other one was. But so these do seem to be changes from one pope to the next.
Yes, but I would argue they pertain to matters of discipline. I think the burden of proof is going to be on others to show otherwise. But even if it were the case that, no, this is a reversal in doctrine, well, okay, that's possible. A pope could reverse a non-definitive doctrinal teaching. That is within the scope of the magisterium and its authority. But I'm going to argue, for example, that the issue with capital punishment, that where Pope Francis speaks about it being inadmissible, is in the context of a society that has certain other alternatives when it comes to its penal system. He's speaking about it being inadmissible, and yes, contrary to the gospel, in instances where the penal system can offer other alternatives. He's not saying that this is contrary to the gospel intrinsically, but he's just saying in certain circumstances this is inadmissible because of the way penal systems are structured. Now, that would pertain to a matter of discipline, in my opinion, and a matter of prudence. It doesn't necessarily pertain to doctrine. If Pope Francis were to come out and say the death penalty is intrinsically evil, now you have a doctrinal proposition. Yeah, but from what I've seen with Pope Francis, it seems to be a disciplinary decision inserted into the catechism.
Jim, thanks very much. We're talking papal infallibility with the man who knows papal infallibility, Michael Lofton. We'll be right back with more questions. And we have a couple lines open. If you want to get in, we can probably get you on with Michael, 888-318-7884.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
I'm continually amazed and humbled at the way God can work through me to help so many people. Although I have no idea what the callers' questions will be that day, I trust that the Holy Spirit can use my education and experience to guide, challenge, or comfort those who call.
Mast Appeal with Colleen Kelly Mast. Saturday morning, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul's Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Sarah's running the board. Killing it, Sarah. Haven't heard one problem. And Edgar's in there on the phones. Mary's on the video. Thanks, everybody, for doing that. I think it's just us right now. We're just four of us chilling in here. Very quiet. Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday afternoon. And we got our new colleague, Michael Lofton, who we've many people here at Catholic Answers have admired from afar for a long time, and now he's an associate apologist here with us at Catholic Answers, doing some writing for us, doing media appearances with us, like this one. And will you hit the road and do any speaking for us, Michael, or is that part of your deal? Or?
I'd love to.
Oh, really?
I'd love to.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you want to, send us a note here at radio@catholic.com, because I think I can probably take 10% off of whatever he gets if it comes to me first. So send it to radio@catholic.com, and we'll send Michael out wherever you are. And where you are is down south, Michael.
Down south, deep south, Monroe, Louisiana, so northeastern Louisiana.
Northeastern Louisiana. How far are you from Lake Pontchartrain?
Ooh, 3-4 hours, somewhere around there. That's pretty far, yeah.
You know, I'll give you a hint why I know about Lake Pontchartrain. It has to do with a Catholic novelist. Any thoughts?
Oh, really? I have no idea who
Walker
this novelist
Percy
might be.
Walker Percy lived on...
Walker Percy, okay.
Yeah, I think he lived right there on Lake Pontchartrain.
Lake Pontchartrain, LP.
The number's 888-318-7884. I'm glad you're getting to know our new affiliate apostolate. Apologist. Oh my gosh, I promoted you to apostle for a second there.
Man, wow, that's a pretty major
congratulations.
Promotion.
Enjoy your martyrdom. 888-318-7884, the number. We're talking about papal infallibility with Michael Lofton. Here we go to Andrew in Ontario, Canada, listening on EWTN.com. Glad to have you, Andrew. Go ahead with your question for Michael.
Hi, my question is, why not just believe the Pope is always right, and then never worry about it? Just go to Mass and go to work and read books and stuff, and if something goes wrong, he'll tell me what's wrong, and it'll be okay.
Oh, what a beautiful sense of confidence you have. But you don't look convinced, Michael.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, the vast majority of people out there, especially throughout history, they didn't need to be some kind of scholar when it comes to the magisterium to know what to assent to and what not to assent to. So there's some truth to the notion that you could ordinarily trust what the magisterium teaches, and your soul's not going to be in jeopardy or anything like that. At the same time, I do think that in this age where there's a lot of information accessible to us, there's a million things being promoted, and people are saying the Pope says this and says that. I do think that you have a certain obligation to form your conscience properly, to inform it, to be properly catechized. So might it impact your life? Might it affect your life if you're maintaining something that isn't true? I actually think that, yeah, it might, because it's going to impact certain decisions that you make morally. So on the one hand, I want to say, yes, ordinarily you can trust the magisterium, and you should. You should be able to trust the magisterium ordinarily. At the same time, I don't think that you should just say, well, because I can ordinarily trust the magisterium, I don't have any responsibility. I can just say, I don't have to catechize myself, just whatever my bishop says, it goes, and that's okay. No, I do think that there is a degree of personal responsibility on some matters. Well, now it's going to vary for each person, right?
Yeah.
According to their state in life.
But I mean, just in fairness to Andrew, he did say reading, and so I assumed that, Andrew, you meant reading about the faith and learning the faith. Do we have Andrew?
Basically, he just said, he just does his job. He goes to work. He doesn't worry about it. And if something goes, not with just his soul, but with the whole world, the Pope will fix it, and everything will be fine. And then, you just go on, and then that's it. You don't have to worry about all these things, complicated doctrines and stuff, because if you really need to know it, the Pope's going to tell you. Not you personally, but the whole world. You know what I mean?
Well, like a complicated doctrine like the Trinity, you mean?
I'm not the smartest guy in the world or anything like that. I'm just saying,
Well, you're pretty smart. I mean, it's obviously you've thought this through, but it's just that, the doctrines of the Church are beautiful too. In addition to everything else that they are, they're beautiful, and knowing that beauty is worthwhile. Michael,
you may, as my dad also says, I think you got me there.
Oh, all right, I like your dad too.
Right about that. I think maybe exploring the faith for the sake of the beauty of the faith, maybe something I'd want to do too. So maybe I should do both, huh?
There's
I'll trust
quite
the Pope and explore the beauty of the faith.
Mm-hmm. And to an extent, I think that there's some safety there. There's quite a few theologians, especially in the preconciliar era, that would argue that there is a safety to papal teachings and magisterial teachings in general, even when they're not infallibly taught. I think on the whole that's true, but here's the problem. A lot of the stuff that we hear today from the Pope and others isn't even magisterial. So that kind of safety isn't present. That kind of general protection of the Holy Spirit for even non-definitive teachings isn't present for those things. So sometimes you might hear something that you might need to question if it's not magisterial. And I would say in those cases, you might have a certain degree of obligation to properly form your conscience and to properly catechize yourself, especially if you're making moral decisions based on these things.
Andrew, thank you. And God bless you. Thanks very much. Very pleasant talking with you. I hope we'll get to talk with you again. All of a sudden now the phones are popping, of course. When there's only a few minutes left, the phones always start popping, so we'll do our best to get to everybody. Eric in Salem, Oregon, listening on the great modern day Catholic radio. Erica, go ahead with your question, please, for Michael.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for talking to me. And the question was, contraceptive teachings were clarified by Pope John Paul II, I believe. And that there was a document that came out from Pope Francis. Let me look at it right here. It says The Joy of Love by Pope Francis. And someone was making the claim that in that document he turned control of choosing whether or not to contracept back to the individual couple, and that it was no longer officially taught that it was inherently inappropriate. Is that what happened, or do you have the right to do that?
I don't think that Pope Francis did that. I'm going to challenge that. I don't think that he actually proposed that. Moreover, if some pope were to come out and do such a thing, I don't think that that's possible, because I would say Humanae Vitae, as expressed by Paul VI, is what we would consider to be definitive, and that cannot be overturned. Perhaps it wasn't taught infallibly by the Pope ex cathedra, but we would say it's definitive by what we would call the ordinary and universal magisterium, which just, very quickly is the idea that something that has constantly been taught by the bishops throughout the ages, by all the bishops throughout the world, as something that is infallible. That's infallible. That's protected by the Holy Spirit as well. And no pope could overturn such a teaching. And I would just simply challenge the notion that Pope Francis did that.
Erica, does that satisfy you?
In looking at it, it did. It didn't specifically say that. It was someone's interpretation on what it had been said.
Yeah, right. And that's always an issue. But the usual complaint about that document, The Joy of Love, is that people have interpreted it as loosening marriage bonds and the requirements around the Eucharist. But I actually, that's much rarer. As a matter of fact, I have not heard anyone say that the Pope changed the teaching on contraception. And I think you can be quite secure that he didn't do that.
Yeah, I think it was an emphasis that each couple did need to discern, but the idea was that their discernment could be whether or not to seek another child, not necessarily whether or not to contracept.
Oh, well, that's the clear teaching of the Church, though. I mean, even in the Declaration on the Rights of the Family under John Paul II, the clear teaching of the Church is the parents choose as far as the spacing of children, and that's a basic human right that essentially the Church teaches that governments have to respect that. Governments can't be involved in that, and that's why the Church teaches that so clearly. But you can't use illicit means to do that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Erica. Thanks very much. I'm sorry I talked so much there at the end, but that just happens to be one that I do know about, the Declaration on the Rights of the Family. It's a beautiful document. Everybody should read it. And the family does need to be protected against the intrusions of the state. Michael Lofton, what a great first... we probably shouldn't have you on anymore, because you can say, I was the best.
I'm going to retire.
Yeah, just retire now. Why go on? You've done so good.
Go out on a good note.
Tell people where they can find you and watch your stuff.
reasonandtheology.com, or go to YouTube, type in Reason and Theology. The show will come right up.
All right, reasonandtheology.com. Thanks, Michael. We'll look forward to talking with you again.
Thanks for having me.
Tomorrow, 2 hours of open forum. I know we got Jimmy Aiken. I don't know who else we got on the schedule. I think it's probably 2 hours with Jimmy. You can ask him, when it's Jimmy, you can ask him anything you want to. So just think of whatever questions you've got. Jimmy loves talking about whatever's on your mind. We'll see you then, God willing, right here, Catholic Answers Live.